Hello and welcome back to the Paws Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kara, and today we're going to be talking about something that worries so many cat families. What happens when you bring a new pet into a home where a cat already rules the roost? Are cats truly solitary or can they be social? And why do some adjust easily while others spray, fight, or withdraw? By the end of the episode, you'll walk away with practical strategies to help your cat accept a newcomer, insights into what's normal cat behavior versus red flags, and tips to set up your home for harmony rather than conflict. My guest today is Tabitha, who brings a wealth of experience in feline behavior to help guide us through this process. Let's get started.
Some common myths are, I just lost my cat and my other cats in the home want another cat. That usually is not the case. Or another one that I commonly hear where I would not necessarily recommend getting another cat. My cat's bored.
Are cats naturally solitary, or do they have the capacity to live in groups?
So they definitely have the capacity to live in groups. It's a very common myth that they are solitary. And again, when we say solitary, we have to realize how a caregiver may hear that because they think solo forever, independent, doesn't have bonds with other animals or with caregivers. And we know, all of you amazing people with cats out there are bonds that these cats form. And I think they can form very strong bonds with their caregivers, but also with other animals.
Very warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so sorry to hear about your kitty and
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sure their last gift to you was that happenstance of that conversation with that breeder. And of course, we're never replacing our animals, but everyone grieves differently. And sometimes having another animal is really helpful throughout that process. But it's such a challenge.
It is a challenge, and thank you. I mean, I think for me, quite initially, I was, to take on a new cat, I was very sort of matter of fact. I was like, she's there. I don't want to get too attached. As soon as you lose a pet, you don't necessarily want to have that kind of bond because the loss is painful. And then, when things don't necessarily go quite to plan, which I'm sure we'll discuss today, you're a bit like, I don't think I should have done this. Maybe it was too soon. But this kitten has turned out to be just phenomenal. Aww. So she has not replaced Mew, my other cat, but she has been entertaining, she's been different, and I have loved the process, but it has not gone without its problems. So I would love us to have the discussion for the benefit of the listeners, but also just for my own curiosity. And how often do you deal with this? How often are owners asking you about how to manage the introduction of a new pet to the household?
Unfortunately, I get, and fortunately, because I love people reaching out for help, but it is very common. A large amount of my, more than you'd think, of my caseload is once the tension is already present. So I love prevention, but as humans, it's a human thing. We are reactive. Be kind to ourselves. We're conditioned that way. So in many cases, it's after tension has been noted, or something. There was a traumatic event, like a redirected or non-recognition aggression event that caused a break in those cats' bonds, and they reach out for help. So also, I think there's limited resources out there, like big picture. A lot of whether we like or dislike the internet, there's a lot of not great information. And I understand why a caregiver is like, I need help. I want help. And a lot of what the internet says, or even some resources from organizations, it's not the most helpful. So it can be challenging.
Yeah, or it's out of date. I mean, because what I'm finding, particularly, we may be a little bit behind here in South Africa, but we are trying. We really are trying. We are keeping up with CPD. We're keeping up with new information. We are in the process of changing our dimensions of our cat ward cages so we can become gold accredited, cat friendly, and so we are really motivated to learn and improve. And I think this now is spilling over to the kind of advice we are giving caregivers, and we have to update our knowledge because things that we thought were okay before, and I'm going to not even tell you, quite how recently we used to scruff cats. And of course now we are devastated that we did this, because we now understand how important it is to have gentle restraint and the impact that it has on the kind of care that we can give. So we're learning, and we want to improve, and in that we want to be able to provide caregivers with the latest and the correct advice. So people like you are really, really helpful in this. So thank you once again.
Practicing veterinary medicine, which I love, because literally we are set up to say we are continuing to evolve and practice. So I love that about vet med. I don't know if everybody does, but like you said, I joke that if I was not working with veterinary clinics or clients or missed a year of CE, I am severely behind, which is good because we want to be moving forward. And as you probably know, handling is something I am very passionate about. And many of us as veterinary professionals aren't set up for success from the beginning, which is why I think a lot of people have challenges handling cats.
No, I totally agree with you. So can we start at the very beginning?
Yes.
Are cats naturally solitary, or do they have the capacity to live in groups?
So they definitely have the capacity to live in groups. It's a very common myth that they are solitary. And again, when we say solitary, like, we have to realize how a caregiver may hear that, because they think solo forever, independent, doesn't have bonds with other animals or with caregivers. And we know, all of you amazing people with cats out there, even in vet med, when we're working with a patient once or twice, there are bonds that these cats form. And I think they can form very strong bonds with their caregivers, but also with other animals. I think the biggest thing is that we have to realize is every animal is an individual. And it's really important as practitioners to highlight the diversity of cat personalities and show that bonding looks different for every situation, right? Like, I always joke, use the analogy, I'm a hugger. I will hug anyone. I will get consent first, either asking or reading body language or both. But my partner is a very well socialized man. And if a stranger hugged him or someone that wasn't in his tiny close circle, he would find that not comfortable. So we have to consider that. And I think using analogies from a human standpoint is really helpful when we're talking to our caregivers to help them understand.
So what, in your experience, or when do cats ever want or benefit from having a second cat in the house, or multi-cat households? When is it that you would be making a recommendation to introduce another?
See, that's a challenging question. I'll be honest, I could say, or it's so limited that I can't recall actively telling someone to get another cat. But also, we have to consider my caseload, right? Like, I see severe behavior problems. So usually I'm like, we need to meet the needs of this animal prior to. Now, are there circumstances that happen where, the caregiver may have a cat that shows up? All my cats were from vet med when I worked in GP. I love them and would have no other way, but I didn't choose necessarily to adopt any of them, if that makes sense. They kind of come into your life. It's really common where a caregiver, I see them for a severe problem, and I always say, being transparent, I'm here to help, not judge. And I go to the follow-up session, they're like, hey girl, hey. And I'm like, hi. And they're like, there's a kitten in the other room. And I was like, what? So I'm not saying I'm not about, like, if a caregiver is reaching out from a proactive standpoint, there is benefits to adopting 2 kittens at a time. Like, that is true. There's research to support that, and that makes sense. But commonly, I think when a caregiver is thinking about getting a cat, some common myths are, I just lost my cat and my other cats in the home want another cat. That usually is not the case. They're grieving as well. Similar to if your best friend passed away, yes, having a social support system, but you're not going to just say, getting a new best friend makes it all better. So people are really well-intentioned, but that's something I commonly see where they lose a cat and they're like, I want to bring in another cat to help the cats. So not necessarily like life happens. That's a common myth. Or another one that I commonly hear where I would not necessarily recommend getting another cat. My cat's bored.
Yes.
And we have
or
to
lonely.
Yes, they're lonely, they're bored, right? So we have to really unpack what bored is. And in many cases, those cats' physical, social, and mental needs aren't being met. And bringing in another cat is actually going to cause more issues, especially due to the fact that a lot of caregivers aren't aware about appropriate introduction, or if that cat needs aren't met, we still have to meet their needs. Not that cat play with other cats isn't helpful, but again, it's not my cat's bored, so let's get another cat, which I commonly see. Again, people are really well-intentioned, but that is not a reason to get another cat.
No, I totally agree with you. And you touched on it, but can you give us some signals or traits that might suggest that a cat is more likely to accept or reject a new pet?
So I think the biggest thing is their overall temperament, right? And then also, in many cases, caregivers aren't aware because, again, cats kind of just beautifully come to us, or we adopt them at a year, or, but appropriate socialization during their key socialization period, which is 2 to 7. I know that's a very short period of 2 to 7 weeks, but I would extend it to 14. But during that time, obviously they are learning all the time, and we can provide healthy, positive socialization experiences after that. It's just going to take a little bit more work versus that key socialization period where literally they're exploring new things, they're bonding with siblings, they're forming bonds. And usually, as long as it's somewhat positive, they're good. Many cats don't receive that. So let's say a cat does receive positive socialization experiences and are introduced to other cats and adult cats in a structured manner. So for example, in my kitten kindergarten classes, there's helper cats and they're well-socialized adult cats that may just be in the background on a cat tree to start. Like they're just comfortable and lounging while the kittens are away. And then we may start to add them walking by the kittens. So again, it's very structured versus, hey, you're a kitten. Here's throw you with some other cats. Go. That necessarily, again, it's really important to monitor and supervise. So those are probably the biggest ones like that. Many cats don't have, again, it's not that they're these like, I'm an only cat. It's just most cats realistically don't have positive socialization experiences, especially they aren't exposed to other cats in a structured, positive fashion. So that would probably be the biggest thing you could do to set your cat up for success, to have other cats.
You look at me, I look at you, I see the love in your eyes.
Health you can see, love you can feel. UltraPet, the science of love.
So one of the questions I often get asked is, okay, I want to get a new kitten. I have a male or female cat. Which sex should I get? Which are more likely to get on with whichever they're asking me about? Is there any difference between their tolerance of new companions?
There is a small amount of research out there, and it's very vague. In my experience, no. I think that is a common question. I think there are things that we could proactively do to set each animal up for success, and that's what we should more focus on. Again, there's some minimal, we have a little bit more with dogs. There's some minimal research, but in my experience, boy or girl, of course, if they're intact, that changes it up a bit because we have hormones and some other things. But generally, no, I don't think that affects things as much as people think.
And is there ever a time where you get asked, should I introduce another cat or am I better to introduce a dog?
So I commonly don't get asked that. Again, it's kind of usually, I love proactive. I do have the occasional caregiver who usually it's when a couple is moving in together and they both have animals. So they reach out prior to moving in together. And usually someone is aware, like, I want a dog or I want a cat. And although there are similar basics and foundations that need to be applied no matter what we're introducing, it could be a ferret or a bunny. It's just definitely dogs and cats are the most common pets. So that's what they tend to be bringing in. But as far as a caregiver asking if it's a cat or dog, there aren't as many cases. Sometimes if I have a dog client, like a dog caregiver, in that case, due to some other underlying individual characteristics, we may discuss bringing in a cat is not ideal. So that's more common on the other end.
Absolutely. I understand that. So when you've got this introduction process, let's talk about some practical guidance for people, like you say, coming together in a household where previously they've been living as separate couples and they're merging their households. How does some territorial behavior complicate multi-pet households, and what is some of the strategies to manage their introduction?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is going at each cat's individual pace. Because one of the common, I'm sure you see as well, they force introductions, or there's timelines that I'm not sure, because I love animal welfare, I work in there too, but I see that there's these timelines that are shared a lot. I'm not sure where these numbers are coming from. Like, in 2 weeks, you're good. And I'm like, based on what? Like, I always joke with caregivers, your therapy, 1 week, you're good. Like, what are these timelines, right? So I think the biggest thing is meeting each cat where they're at. And because in many cases, one cat is ready to go to the next step, but the other one isn't. But we then go to the next step. So looking at each cat individually and also addressing their needs. The amount of inter-cat tension I see due to underlying medical issues where we didn't address each cat as an individual first, and this cat has chronic pain. Everything is harder. They can't learn, think, or focus. They can, but it's a lot more challenging. So I'll be honest, in many cases, when I meet each cat's individual needs, that introduction goes a lot, which makes sense. But in many cases, we're not even considering that. So I think those are big points. And then, of course, you knew I was going to say adequate resources. I mean, that is a huge one. Like, you use the word territorial, and that's not wrong, but I am a language nerd. Mm-hmm. So with my caregivers, I always unpack that word. Because again, territorial, again, it's not the wrong word to use. I know we utilize it a lot in research and textbooks, but I'm kind of talking to a caregiver and I'm aware what that word implies. Like cat. Yes. And I'm like, I grew up with 3 siblings and I'm close. Again, I'm well socialized. Most cats are not. And if there was one Diet Coke in the fridge, I would resort to physical aggression at 14. And yes, my brain wasn't fully formed. But, and then caregivers immediately, I'm like, it's not about cats being like, there are literally not enough resources. And these cats may not even be bonded. Like, they're more like roommates and you only have one bathroom, right? Or you have no cat resting areas in your main living space. That's a huge one. Like, caregivers, when I'm doing a consult, I ask them, where do you hang out the most? And yes, there should be resources throughout, but there definitely better be resources in those areas. Because again, like you mentioned, cats love us. They want to be with us. And when I ask about cat specific, yes, a couch is a resting spot. That totally counts. It definitely does. But cat specific resting spots, whether these are cat shelves, a cat tree. I mean, there's so many options. It could be like, this is my bookshelf. I put a non-slip bath mat on it. That's a elevated resting area for my cats. So it doesn't have to be like this I mean, you can get really wild with it, which I love. It can look so many different ways. But in many cases, there are not enough resources, which then also affects that individual cat's physical, social, and mental needs aren't being met. Like, there aren't enough safe spaces. We're not having an environment with multiple and separated key environmental resources, or that environment isn't honoring the importance of scent for cats. So not only is that important if you have multiple cats, but it's even important for one cat, because to me, having safe spaces, vertical spaces, places for them to scratch, allowing them to be a cat is the same as providing water and food.
So what would your advice be if you had one cat and you're introducing another? What is the general rule for the number of litter trays and food bowls and water bowls and resting spaces?
Yeah, so it's going to look a little different for every cat, right? And every environment. Like, I work with my humans as learners too. But I do, sometimes caregivers are like, I only have so much space. I'm like, let's go. I work with people who live in Manhattan and essentially live in a closet, and there are still things we can do. Again, so it might look a little different. We do have some general guidelines, like 1 litter box plus 1, right, for cats. But I think it's important to unpack the whys with caregivers, because as a young tech, I would say that, but I wouldn't explain the whys. And I'm like, I definitely understand why this caregiver was like, meh. And we have to realize 5 litter boxes within a few feet of each other is 1 litter box, because that's 1 scent space, right? Even, one in one corner and one in another, depending on the size of your room, that still may be 1 litter box. So I think it's important to have multiple litter boxes on different floors and considering the areas you are in the most. So those are things to consider. As far as food and water, I like them to be separated because that's what cats also prefer. They're prey predator animals. So I always tell my caregivers, you're the sweetest, most amazing caregiver. You're reaching out for help, but your cat is worried about dying all the time. Because they're prey predator animals, which is why they don't like food and water together. Or caregivers are like, I swear my cats like eating together. I'm like, the likelihood they do is lower than the likelihood, then they most likely don't enjoy it. That doesn't mean they won't eat. Just like, if I love my partner, we're actually bonded versus like roommates. But if he ate off my plate every day during dinner, I would, like, within a day or two, I would start like guarding it. So when you think about it, obviously a cat is a cat, a human is a human, but I think there are so many similarities. And when we use these analogies to explain to caregivers, and then also adaptability, right? Like if I have a cat with chronic kidney issues or chronic arthritis, right? And the other cat, we don't necessarily have those underlying medical issues. I'm going to identify where that kidney issue or IBD cat is the most. And there's going to be boxes near there because we know there's urgency. But I know as a young tech, that was not in treatment plans where we're like, we know we're prescribing this medication that causes PUPD, or we know that you have urgency and discomfort, even though we're managing this IBD. That should be a part of the treatment plan. So again, it's not, this is what we do because it's a guideline. It's let's unpack the why, or we're going to have even more options for water. To me, the more the better. Just think about it in your home. You don't have to have 10 waters, but if you want, I'm not going to be mad about that. So the more resources you have, the better. Just like growing up, I didn't have a lot of income. My mom is great, but we had limited resources, which increased the tension. I have 1 bathroom in my home now, and I only live with one other person, and it has definitely increased the tension. And I feel safe. I'm not a prey animal. So again, we have to kind of consider, if you think you have enough resources, put more.
And can you explain the importance of the vertical space and the escape routes in a multi-cat household?
Yes. And then when it comes to where we place these resources, right? Because people may say, there's that joke, we've all heard it, right? You spend all this money on a thing and they play with the box, which is great. There's a bunch of super cheap DIY enrichment and meeting safe spaces. But when it comes to scratchers, water, food, litter boxes, all those essential resources, one of the guidelines is that there are exits and entrances, multiple ideally. Now, I understand every resource can't be like that. Like, I don't expect you to put a litter box in the middle of your room where your cat can literally see everything, or your water. But in many cases, none of the cat's resources in the homes I go to are like that. Because again, they are prey predator animals. So multiple entrances and escapes is just a crucial part. Like a litter box hiding in a closet, because I understand as humans, we're like, poop, and I'm always like, you poop. I'm not going to put your bathroom outside, but especially if it's a covered box, that's essentially what we call an ambush area. So even if you have one cat or multiple cats, they don't feel safe every time they use that resource. Or for example, for food and water, I used to do this, right? I would put them against the wall, and now I just push them out just a little bit more, because for a prey animal to be like, I can't see anything that's going on around me. Some cats will actively move their water bowl. And as caregivers, we're like, I'm going to buy a heavier bowl instead of look at the function of the behavior. When that cat just wants to, I've seen cats drinking water like so uncomfortably because they can see everything. So yeah, that's another thing. Like, yes, you may have these resources, which I'm going to reinforce. That's amazing. But let's unpack how they feel safe. Or I'll go into a home and I'll see a cat tree, a vertical space, and they're like, my cat doesn't use it, which is a great observation. And then I go to it and I'm like, this is really top heavy. I wouldn't sit on a wobbly chair more than once. This wobbles a little bit. So I can instantly say, I understand why your cat's not using that. Or we may move it to another area. Like we know that cats like to scratch and stretch when they first wake up. So ideally, placing a scratcher near where they rest is ideal. Or we know that narrow spaces, whether I'm a human or a cat, so like hallways, the bottom and top of stairs, there's escalated tension for any, again, I'm not going to go down an alleyway, especially as a woman. So I will place a scratcher there because cats also scratch to release tension as a displacement behavior. And if I give them an outlet, they're less likely to escalate and maybe paw or claw at that other cat.
That's so interesting. I did not know that. So before we tackle some of the signs that might indicate that there are issues, can you explain some of the behaviors that people ask us about? And one of them, you said like moving the bowl out of the way. But one of the things we see with new introductions is cats trying to cover their food. We see it in the hospital environment as well, that imaginary pawing at the ground to what people verbalize as trying to hide the food. What is happening there?
It depends. I know, right? We love that answer. I should just get a tattoo. In many cases, I see that due to underlying GI issues versus not. To me, behavior is medicine. They're not in separate boxes, but I also understand the point of those. I commonly see that with like underlying GI discomfort, nausea, but also we can sometimes see it when a cat doesn't necessarily feel safe. So they're going to cover this up technically to get it later so another cat doesn't eat it. Because again, I do see that, but not as commonly as you think. But usually it's the first thing where we're dealing with some nausea, underlying GI discomfort, in rare cases, dental discomfort. So that's where my brain goes first. But also, no matter what patient I'm dealing with, as a foundation, again, I'm meeting those physical, social, mental needs. So we're placing waters and foods in areas that we know that they prefer, and then going from there. So then if I still continue to notice that behavior, I'm like, that's something we're definitely going to share with our vet. Very important information.
No, it is important, especially in that context. So there are signs that indicate the cats are stressed, that owners can visualize, that we can explain and say this is a cat that is uncomfortable, is stressed, versus a very content pet.
Yes.
Like Xena is on my lap chilling now. You can see her.
Beautiful, stretched out.
She's very happy. What do you generally explain in terms of postural changes and vocal signs that indicates that cats are stressed?
So especially we can look at like when they're doing these signs, the frequency, right? Like we do with medical, like you're coughing this much, this is when we notice it. So we're noting these signs when they're 2 feet away from the cat, and over a month, it's been 5 feet, right? When they see that cat. So we tend to see tension throughout the face and body, which I know can be a little challenging for us to recognize sometimes. Once you see that tension, because in a larger bully breed, for example, you might be like, I see that from a distance. I can see tension in a cat face. So I think taking a look at what that looks like, and then also, of course, piloerection, where we see that hair standing up. Now, usually we're not seeing a Halloween cat, and if you are, please contact someone for help, because that is not as common. But usually what we're noticing is hair standing up on the back. Maybe the tail just poofs up on the hind end. And then we may notice ears going back, eyes widening, pupils dilating, and then of course vocalization. So it may be a hiss, which a hiss isn't necessarily a bad thing. Because again, I hiss at my siblings sometimes, right? So that's where we also have to consider frequency. But hissing, growling, or even you start to learn your cat's meows. Cats meow to mostly, because they're so amazing, they've learned that meowing is mostly communication for humans. And you know, because you live with your cat, what different meows possibly indicate. So you may notice like a louder meow that for my cat is when they're happy with a toy in their mouth. But for your cat, you've noticed it in the past when they've been stressed. So you also have to look for what is your cat's baseline. And then some other things on a bigger spectrum we tend to see is one of the cats chasing, because play and aggression look very similar. And I've even seen my amazing colleagues misinterpret play as aggression or aggression as play. So with play, we're seeing mostly like bouncy, and it might just be a small curve. So like curved body language. We might see mild tension and tails flicking because that can be partially arousal. But we're also seeing like mostly soft face, ears forward, minimal vocalizations with play. And there's breaks. So that break might be, I chase you and we lay out for a second and shake, and then the other cat chases the other cat. Or it could be like where they're meowing, like kind of like at each other's faces, and they just take a break and go, that was a break. So those are some signs. And then also, are they doing affiliative behaviors outside of that play, right? Do they rest on the same piece of furniture, which might be touching, but also if they're comfortable, if one cat's on the bottom of the cat tree and one's on the second or third floor of the cat tree, they're sharing that resource comfortably. Obviously, if they're licking each other, so we're kind of looking at the whole picture versus fighting, where we tend to see ears back, tension throughout the whole body, one cat repeatedly chasing another cat, vocalizations. And that's where it can be really helpful to get videos. But then as veterinary professionals, we need to learn how to recognize the differences between those two things. And then also from a larger perspective, what I tend to see in intracat aggression cases is self-segregation. So you might be like, my cats love me. They used to always hang out, even though one would be on this side of the room, hence the amount of resources we should have. So they have choices to not be near each other, but one and you're like, she's been upstairs a lot. So that cat it also can indicate they're not feeling well. So we should take that as data, but that cat has generalized how they feel with that other cat, or those altercations or interactions with that cat, to even when that cat isn't present. We also tend to see house soiling. I see house soiling as a secondary thing in many intercat aggression cases, because stress is a huge contributing factor, and lack of resources and an appropriate litter box setup, which all tends to also be happening. So there are quite a few signs once we learn how to recognize them. And then of course, if the cats are straight up fighting, right? Yeah. Like Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons in a ball. I've seen cats unfortunately injure each other to the severity of like broken limbs, and usually it's due to them running so quickly things fall on them, or jamming. Again, like one cat's so terrified, and it just all escalates very quickly. But ideally, we would help our caregivers recognize, because we can still help. Heck yes, we can. But ideally, we would help them recognize those symptoms before it gets to that extent.
So before we unpack some of the examples that you've given, how do you manage them in the moment? Is this again your tattoo? It depends, or does it depend on the severity? But for example, with the house soiling, are you intervening? Are you managing the situation post-incident in the same way as a fight? If you're seeing a fight, do you separate it? How do we manage these things? Obviously, we're going to be tackling some of the longer-term strategies, hopefully, in some of our discussion. But in that moment, I think often owners can perpetuate the problem and make it worse.
Yeah, I think in the moment, we can think, because again, if we're noticing some of those redder signs like self-segregation, house soiling, the one cat is actively stressed. So they are lip licking, hypervigilant, lower down. Like in that case, as immediate management, we should create safe spaces for the cats, because not all cats are comfortable being in a room. So we have to make that positive first and separate those cats, because we need to allow them to have some recovery from stress. And also every interaction is going to cause more stress. As we both know, when you're really stressed, if you're exposed to that stressor repeatedly, it escalates. We get sensitized, right? Versus I want some recovery, and then I'm going to work on building some healthy coping mechanisms to handle that. So we may need to do that. Again, I'm going to keep going back to physical, mental, and social needs, because in many cases, cats' types of play are like, we tend to see this with older versus younger cats. Like they have different types of play, because older cats still play. And if they're not, that is data that they may be painful. It's not normal, but their play styles may be different. So I'm going to increase high arousal enrichment for that kitten, and help to meet their needs in the moment. Like I talk to caregivers, because management sometimes breaks. Like we all do our best, but things aren't perfect. So I have my caregivers, and this is more extreme situations, right? But I have them keep thicker blankets on their couch. And again, let's say this is a more severe case, one cat happens to get out, and because of an accident, and you notice severe tension, because usually you're walking into it. In that case, I can have you place a blanket over one of the cats and scoop them. And we actually practice them scooping a stuffed animal. I do this with my vet colleagues for handling too, if a cat gets loose in the clinic. We practice. I don't say, hey, let's wait till something horribly stressful happens. Now I want you to go with this new technique. Again, my clients have only one client have had in like 10 years, but my job is to give them strategies. Also, I'm a huge fan of toy and treat stations, like so much. And what I mean, especially in like mild to moderate, where the cats aren't necessarily so severe that we need to separate them, I show clients what body language looks like. So they're more empowered and can identify earlier signs of stress. And then I have them place either like a mason jar with treats and or a basket of toys that their cat likes. So this might be balls with bells, or crinkle, right? Not just any toys that your cat likes. And in many cases, it's behind a client's couch, because I want to make it so easy for my caregivers. And let's say you see the cat staring for 4 seconds and one comes into a narrow space, like between the coffee table and the couch. You're going to toss a treat or a toy to redirect that other cat. And then you may give the one cat in front of you like verbal praise if they find that reinforcing, or a treat. And in many cases, clients are like, aren't I reinforcing them fighting? I'm like, no, you can't reinforce emotional states. But also, what was the behavior they were doing a second before they went disengaging? So where it's such an easy activity, and in many cases, I see severe tension decrease because that other cat is like, they usually don't have any learning history of this. And they have a learning history where other cat comes in, there's subtle, like early, like green to yellow signs of stress. And then they're like, that cat disengaged on his own. And that is reinforcing to that cat that usually gets stared at. So again, it's really complex behavior mod, but we're making it, I'm like, client, can you move your arm and grab, right? We really need to work with our human learners. And then the last thing I would say is avoiding aversives. So aversives are just something a human or animal learner doesn't enjoy. So this could be every animal and human is different. For some animals and humans, yelling is not aversive. For some, it is. Or there are shock collars for cats. It's a bummer, but there are shock mats, water, shaking cans, all this silly, rough stuff that our caregivers are unfortunately possibly exposed to in that cultural fog of all that media. So letting clients know that escalate, like punishing them, first off, you don't control where they generalize that to. You're escalating fear and tension, which is the underlying cause to this behavior to begin with. Issues escalate, your cat's more likely to redirect you. I mean, there's many reasons we don't use aversives, but I do think it's really important to tell caregivers. So a lot of caregivers are punishing, like their cat is hissing, which is essentially like communication, which is awesome. And they're punishing that, which is really dark. Same thing about punishing a dog for a growl. And I get deep and I use deep analogies. And I'm like, that's telling your daughter, like, don't say you're uncomfortable when a guy is, and I know you're like, what? No, but it's the same.
Makes sense.
So I think that's the other thing. And then telling caregivers to not, especially if there's elevated tension, we don't reach for cats. We lure, or in a very extreme situation, I might have them have a laundry basket they put over one of the cats. And again, that's only been used for one of my cases. And that's a severe thing, or human directed aggression or something like that. But I'm considering all of those management strategies in the like immediate.
How frequently do you find the owner's tension contributes to an escalation?
More common. Usually, again, these caregivers are already amazing. They love their cats. They are reaching out for help, which is a huge step. But again, punishment's condition in our society with humans. So understandably, it is utilized or recommended by uncredentialed, there's no education there usually. They don't have credentials. They're not evidence-based. But it's common that that's what our caregivers are exposed to. And again, like if that's what they're starting with, because also clients tend to pick victims and bullies, which are not what I use. There is no victim and there is no bully. Both cats are suffering and struggling for different reasons. And we have to understand the function, like what's the function of the behavior, and reminding caregivers that cats aren't spiteful or guilty. Like I love humans, but that's a human thing, because caregivers will create these narratives. Like I remember one case, it was a kitten and a senior kitty. And this was before the caregiver reached out, and they took videos, which is great because I use videos, and they shared those as a baseline before. And she was using a spray bottle on the kitten. And also when introducing the kitten, put them in a playpen in the middle of the living room so the other cat could just interact. Yeah. But again, this is something you tell your caregivers not to do. And that kitten couldn't escape. So, and actually the kitten was a lot more fearful of the senior cat. Not that either cat was bad. And that kitten, we worked through it, but had a lot of pretty severe issues due to those which I get, that we had to unpack because they were flooded, exposed to that other cat full force, wasn't able to escape, wasn't monitored. Like there was no classical conditioning, or counter conditioning where we start each cat at a place they're comfortable at. That's another thing. Like, it's not just food on sides of doors. One cat non-stressful starting point might be under the bed, while another cat's is right at the door. And we're definitely starting with the door closed. And we have to work up to each cat being comfortable. And thankfully, those cats are happy. They have kids now. It's beautiful, like the humans do. It's beautiful. But I remember that case because that kitten was, we had to undo a lot of stuff that again, it's great that we helped, but because of those aversives and misintroduction and vilifying of the bully kitten, it caused quite a lot of issues that could have been prevented.
I can imagine. So there are some examples that we get a lot, or some cases that we find are just repetitive. The fighting, firstly, because we see them for the wounds, and then the house soiling. Can we use those as examples, just some of the strategies that you provide our caregivers, just so that they can see that there is hope?
Yes.
In terms of managing those behaviors, because those are often reasons why they start discussing rehoming. It creates such huge tension, and there is a lot of tension around the financial impact of ending up in those situations. Like, we can't have these cats fighting. This is costing a lot in terms of the treatment that's required. Or I can't keep dealing with a cat spraying in the house. This is becoming, we can't live with these things longer term. So can we discuss those two in a little bit more detail? And obviously you can, if we have particular owners or my listeners who are listening to this, they can approach you directly and potentially consult with you and explain their situation, but just some of the strategies that you have found that have worked in the past.
Yeah, I think as veterinary professionals, a huge thing we could do is I know it sounds cliche, but be empathetic and get more data. And also realize that behavior is expressed, or medical problems and disease is expressed behaviorally. Because I so commonly hear things like, my vet said it's behavior. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what? And I understand that that's what my colleagues say a lot, but I think, listening and addressing the client and just saying, like, this does suck. Like, this is frustrating. But the great news is, like, this is something I commonly say. I'm like, I empathize with them. Some clients I actively take outside, or virtually I have them step outside and we just scream. And then we come inside because I'm like, this is frustrating and I'm going to acknowledge that. And I'm not going to downplay that. But also I'm not going to downplay that your cat is struggling, just like with any medical. Does it suck for your cat to have diabetes? Heck yes, it does. But there are treatments. Your cat's not being spiteful or guilty. So I think veterinary professionals just listening, addressing their stress, but also letting them know that cats aren't spiteful or guilty and that your cat is communicating something is wrong. So I flip it on the positive. So I'm like, this is great because we can help now. And then if you feel like this is out of your scope, you're going to work it up medically always, but you're going to refer them to, because a lot of people don't realize people like me exist. Like, I've dealt with cases where they've been house soiling for 5 years. And I understand there aren't as many VTSs or VBs as we would like. We're working on inspiring others, but we exist. And I think we refer to oncologists and cardiologists, but unfortunately, I don't see us referring to evidence-based animal welfare positive behavior. We might Google, which is very dangerous because behavior isn't regulated. So I think for my colleagues, that's huge. Like, you just listening will make an insane amount of difference, validating their feelings and offering support and hope is huge. Because house soiling, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. It's not challenging, but more than like a large amount is very easily manageable. And in many cases, it's preventable. Like, holy moly. So I think an appropriate litter box setup is key. Because no matter what I'm dealing with, whether it's human-directed aggression, Intracat aggression, where house soiling isn't even present, an appropriate litter box setup, meaning like multiple boxes on each floor, low entrance boxes that are large enough, which are usually Sterilite containers, which are $5 versus these horrible robot, expensive, dangerous, problematic, I don't need more business. Like, again, what our caregivers are being marketed. I always tell caregivers that's like a robot litter box is like your cat peeing in a cup. Like you peeing in a cup, but every day. So in many cases, and I have resources on my website about what an appropriate litter box setup is, like free handouts. So please use them. But that makes a really big difference for inner cat tension, but also for house soiling. Because in many cases, there aren't enough resources so that cat doesn't feel safe. Like, for example, where a cat goes is really helpful too. So I have my clients keep a journal, which I recommend for all you caregivers out there. Like, where do they go? Is it a medium amount, which is the size of a 5'2" person's mind, fist? Is it small or large? Because if it's a large amount and we're not noticing changes on maybe blood work, things like that, in many cases, that means the cat doesn't feel safe. So they're holding it in and going once a day, which is a bummer. Or if a cat goes in the middle of a bed. I'm not saying it's always this, but that's data that tells me, oh, on top of the bed, they can see everything around them. So they don't feel safe. Versus if they're marking on a counter, which marking is different than house soiling, like a kitchen counter, that tension and stress plays a part in everything, but commonly there's stressors outside. So as management, I could just be like, throw some sheets with some tape, like immediate management, right? So for house soiling, I think the biggest things are appropriate litter box setup, but ideally we should be having caregivers. In my 12 years of consulting, and to be fair, I did not have one either. So be kind to yourselves. I have literally never seen an appropriate litter box setup in a house ever. And that is very eye-opening to me. And again, as a younger tech where I was a good tech, I also did not have an appropriate litter box setup. So I think that is such a crucial part. And then also when it comes to stressors, like if we recognize the other cat is a stressor for the cat, we have to create safe spaces. So we want to ID, to the best of our ability, identify and manage or avoid triggers. Like a lot of cats, a client might say, they always hide when someone comes over, and that's just normalized. Like caregivers have just normalized that. And then I ask things like, when does your cat return to baseline? So for example, for some cats, it's the second the person leaves. Some cats, they aren't back to themselves until 2 days. So that's really helpful data. That tells me either way, I'm creating a safe space and that cat goes in there with enrichment activities. You don't need to interact with strangers. It's 2025. Your friends should not be ringing your doorbell or knocking. So those are little things. And then we work up to giving that cat the confidence, addressing underlying medical needs, all of that. But as immediate management, I'm going to identify that trigger and either avoid it if possible or manage it. And that with inner cat tension and house soiling is a game changer. So meeting physical, social, and mental needs, which includes an appropriate litter box setup, and then identifying and avoiding triggers and avoiding aversives would be my top three, those are broad things, but those top three things help with everything, not just house soiling and intracat aggression, any behavior issue.
So what's your take on pheromones, either via diffusers or sprays?
So it's funny because you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that we're always progressing. And I used to utilize them a lot more than I do now. I'm not saying that they're bad. I do think caregivers, again, this is where you awesome colleagues can come into hand before you even refer them. A lot of caregivers are like, I tried everything. I use Feel Away. And I'm like, and I make it real positive. Obviously, I'm very extroverted and meet clients where they're at. But I'm like, the great news is you actually haven't tried anything. And then I have a whole spiel cultural fog out there. You're an amazing caregiver. You're trying to find information. And even if you were doing things that were helpful, you were throwing 30 things at it. No one was getting data. So I think a lot of caregivers, just like how there's a common misconception that anti-anxiolytic is this magic pill. Feel away or pheromones aren't magic either. Now, I don't recommend pheromones as much anymore, but the reason why is I know there's some newer ones coming out in the market. I always forget. The one I'm really excited about that I haven't used yet, the original vet creator of Feel Away left Siva and started working with a new company. And it comes in hand sanitizer form. I'm very excited about it, but it's so new I haven't utilized them yet. But the reason why I don't commonly, like, as far as, I definitely don't think they hurt, but as far as like immediate recommendations is we all have limited funds and time. So, and I'm aware of other, like, there's been some issues with clients remembering to do the refills and like the way that there were some issues with the actual diffusers, which I know the company has worked on, but I'm aware of that. And again, financial. And I'm like, I could just have them create a scent continuity other ways. So for example, I'm going to increase scratchers, which I'm usually doing anyways, because that allows them to spread their pheromone, their scent. I'm going to increase self-groomers, which I wish there were more products regarding self-groomers. So anyone out there, please make them and I will recommend you. So essentially those are those things that you can put at your cat's level and they can scent. But also if there is something that your cat already rubs against a lot, you're not going to ever wash that. I've had a lot more success with that. And that's essentially very, very low cost. So again, I'm kind of meeting my caregivers where they're at. And also we all have limited funds. I'm not opposed to pheromones. It's just not my immediate go-to anymore. I build up that scent continuity a little different, which also helps with marking a lot because cats are marking, which is a normal communication tool. So I'm like, your cats, and I explain to caregivers, I'm like, I get this sucks, but this is appropriate house or marking. So I'm like, we don't want it. And I get it. So we're going to give your cats lots of other outlets to spread their scent. And then the caregiver's like, that totally, so I'm not vilifying the cat. I'm explaining that it's normal behavior. I'm saying it sucks. And we are going to work towards it. But then I'm like, here are human appropriate outlets for that cat. So I think addressing anything like that. But again, I'm not opposed to them. It's just not, it used to be like one of my go-to things and it isn't anymore as much.
That's very interesting.
I know, hot take. It's a hot Tabitha take.
Yeah, no, very, very good. And in terms of nutrition, are there any diets that you particularly recommend? You know, obviously there are hills, they've got CD stress, there are stress components to some of the diets that they're recognizing might be of benefit. Do you rate them? Do you recommend them?
So, of course, I work with the veterinary team in all cases, and I'm not opposed to a stress diet. Again, it's not usually part of my immediate, because of course that veterinarian is prescribing, right? It's like if I had to go immediate treatment plan, it's not in there. But let's say this cat has urinary issues that indicate CD. Heck yes, you should do CD stress. And then I think Royal Canin has a diet, the Calm diet, which I do feel, I'm also a huge fan of probiotics. Like that I'm more of a fan of, like because again, perfect world, we do everything. But if I had to prioritize like Fortiflora Calm or a probiotic, for both cats and dogs, I have found to be a helpful aid, like tool. But I definitely like the diets. Also, I know there's the new, I think there's a cognitive diet that it might be Hills. See, don't quote me. There's a new diet that is cognitive function for cats, but also has the joint. And I know that doesn't have stress, but I'm like, that's awesome. Like, because so many cats have arthritis and joint issues. And then the cognitive function, like, that was a diet I was really excited about. So I think they're helpful tools, but I think the biggest thing that we should consider is whether it's Feel Away or a a diet that helps to also address stress, they do not work on their own, because that's what caregivers think. I think that's the hugest takeaway. Like, there's a lot of appropriate, awesome calming aids, which I utilize multiple, and I identify my human, what they can do and what my cats are responsive to. Now, I have a lot of information, like research, but also, thankfully, I have tons of experience with multiple, like thousands of cats, where, of course, every cat's an individual, but I'm going to start with the things that I know work for most cats, and then we're going to kind of adapt.
And have you ever had to reach out to, I don't quite know how it works in your setup, but when we work with behaviorists, we are often contacted to say, look, in order for me to manage this, it would be helpful if you prescribe this. And we don't have to go into the specifics of the medication, but just in order to be able to facilitate some of the behavioral changes, that some medication might be of benefit to manage things from a medical perspective.
Sure. So anti-anxiolytics, whether it's a nutraceutical or like a situational or a daily, definitely, because again, we're going to treat, if that animal is exhibiting multiple signs of generalized anxiety, for example, we need to treat that medically. So honestly, especially because I'm a VTS, which is why, unfortunately, I mostly only see pretty severe, fortunately and unfortunately, pretty severe cases, I approach things very holistically, both medically and behaviorally. And one of the things, I'm very transparent with my caregivers, where I'm like, I'm going to need, like, I need vet records first. Like, it is already established, like, as if you are going to work with me, I need to work with your veterinarian. And if you don't have a relationship with a veterinarian, which is common, we work together to build a relationship, and I help them advocate for their cats, but also advocate for my amazing cat-friendly, more behavior, centric veterinarians, because everyone doesn't like everything, and that's okay. But like, from a handling standpoint, let's say I have a really fearful cat that may exhibit frozen or fear-aggressive behavior. It's not me throwing shade to anyone, but handling is a skill. I know many of us don't see it like that. So I'm going to purposely refer to a veterinarian that is more skilled in handling. So it's actually gotten to the point, just because of my schedule, because we all know we do all the things, I created a referral network. So which behavior professionals can join, but a lot of veterinary professionals join, because we briefly meet for 5 to 10 minutes, either in person or over Zoom. Because one, I do think when you see each other, I'm a human connection nerd, and I do think there makes a really big difference as far as like a respect and kindness and seeing a face. But then I also asked the vet, like, what type of information? Like, some vets are like, please send me, which I'm all about planting seeds. I'm all about planting behavior seeds. But some vets are like, hey, just give me like a 3 bullet point, which I also respect, right? So I'm meeting them where they're at. And then also I share all my observations. Like, for pain, I do pain scores because it's such a contributing factor in my case. I'm a little sensitive to pain, and I share that when I talk about it, because my caseload, that as a baseline, I get a fecal score, I do a pain score, I do a feline grimace score, and I have them get, whether it's in person or virtually, 3 to 5 videos of their cats playing. And I said, if your cat, and I'm always clear, it might be them just watching the toy or flapping over, which is data, still record it, because a client will just say, my cat doesn't play. So you have to be clear. How I want them, ideally, if they can get it, them using the litter box and their gait and doing something quirky. The amount of hyperesthesia that has been diagnosed with my help, because again, I am lucky that I'm in the home, and it's all behavior. I'm biased, but it is. So is chronic pain. Chronic pain is really hard. We need the caregiver's help. And thankfully, the new up-to-date pain guidelines are really stressing that. Like, our job is hard enough. Chronic pain is so, we need the caregiver's help. And in some cases, I may even narrate those videos and share literally every symptom I see and give it to the vet. So Because there is a bit, like, I'm just going to be honest, there is a bit of a power dynamic issue in our fields. Like, I'm not going to downplay it, right? Just like human medicine, I respect all my colleagues. And yes, I'm one of 33 VTSs in the world, but either way, we should respect each other. And sometimes I tell the caregiver, I'm like, it's hardly happened because, again, we're a beautiful community, but in the rare cases it has, if we're not working together, or if there's like, even after all that, they're like, the cat's fine. Oh, that F word. None of us like it. Then I'm like, we need to get a second opinion, which doesn't happen often, but that just expresses the importance of the collaboration. Because again, I created that referral network to make that even easier. Like, hey, and the vet will send the records ahead of time, just like any specialist. Because we have so much to go through. So if I already have those records sick, and if that client doesn't have a veterinarian, it's awesome because I get to help them create a relationship with one and understand the importance of having a relationship with a veterinarian, especially before an emergency. Ideally, because I love me and my colleagues, and I advocate for us as much as I advocate for the animals that I work with.
Yeah, I mean, you have to come together in the
Yes.
interests of the animals ultimately.
Yes.
So before we wrap up, because I want to be able to understand how my listeners can contact you if they need you, because I am making the assumption that you can take on more consults. But before we wrap up, if there's one thing that you wish more pet owners understood before bringing home a new pet, what would it be?
Biggest thing, there is no set timeline. Like there isn't, it's been a week, just like with therapy, right? It's not, for some of you, one session may be helpful. But and then to look at each cat individually. Like something I also commonly see, let's say a cat is coming into a new home. That cat has zero opportunity to explore that new space without the other cat present. And we have to first work on that cat becoming gradually comfortable with that space. Like to start, I have the client shut all the doors, the other cat's in a room with a safe space with an enrichment activity, and we're closing all the other doors to minimize, because again, it's a lot, a new place. And then I'm going to have you set up enrichment activities around where their room is. So one, they're getting reinforced for exploring and positive associations with this new house, but they might pop out for a minute or two and pop back into their safe room and pop out again. And we need to introduce them to that space first, and then gradual introductions with each other based on each cat. One cat might be ready to go to the next set, but one might not be.
And at what point do people reach out to professionals like you?
So I love prevention. We all do. But again, I understand as humans, even myself, I go to the doctor once I was already injured. I'm working on it. But if you know, like, again, a lot of couples reach out and they're like, we know we're moving into each other. I have a dog, blah, blah, blah. That's amazing. Or because again, if we're proactive, as you can imagine, it goes a lot more, it goes well. And I always tell clients, like 3 months might seem like a long time, but for a lifetime of like my dog and cat are obsessed with each other. And yes, they're 13 and 15 now, but I did an appropriate introduction to begin with. So I think to ideally be proactive, but also never be afraid to ask for help, no matter, because these are frustrating situations. It's happening to you, which makes it harder. Like, just realistically, there is help out there. I think that's the biggest thing. And there may be cases where the best case is us rehoming a cat. Again, that's not common, but I'm very transparent with my caregivers, and we know that we're doing the best by each patient or each cat, and we're going to set them up for success in their new home. So either way, it's a win. Or sometimes success is each cat being separated and transferring is on cue and it's easy. Everyone, also what success is looks different. Like for you, 5 miles, amazing, huge, right? For me, I'm running very, very far distances, but neither of those things are wrong. So I think the biggest thing is no matter where you're at, don't be afraid to ask for help, avoid aversives, and never have them fight it out. That is something, unfortunately, I still hear. That is not helpful. It will make it worse.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and it will possibly it's definitely going to cause severe emotional trauma, but can also cause physical.
And I'm always surprised at how much some of these caregivers tolerate. And when some of these things are resolved, that they go, I didn't realize quite what an impact that was having on my life. Now that we've got through it, that, it is worth dealing with things where you recognizing that these are not normal behaviors, but they can be corrected. I'm using negative, but they can be managed.
You're amazing. Look at you.
Look how I'm improving. And that there is help out there. And I think, we've got to get that information out, and we've got to make people aware that they don't have to suffer in silence and think that this is what they have to live with, and begrudge or sort of resent what's going on, because it's meant to be positive engagement and an enjoyable thing being a pet owner. So I'm super grateful for people like you out there providing the service that you do, and I definitely will be referring people to you. But if my listeners want to get in contact with you, where do they find you? How do they find some of the resources that you mentioned? You're very active on social media. Tell us more.
Thank you so much for having me, you amazing person. And you definitely need to send me pictures of your kitten via email. But you can reach me so I have a website, chirpsandchatter.com, where I have more information than you. I have handouts, articles, podcasts. I have a podcast, because I think getting this information out in a practical way, like practical tips, is so important. But I'm also on TikTok, Chirps, or Instagram. There's so many, everybody, and Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. And then I often do a lot of virtual, because I also have my events. So I do a lot of virtual webinars or conferences if you want to extra nerd out, which is great. But I also do a lot of in-persons. I haven't made it out to Australia yet. I would love to, but I have traveled all across the country and world. So. And then also, I do see behavior consults. Of course, I have a bit of a waiting list. We're out here doing our best. And you can find information on how to contact me for that on my website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking time out of your what is a very, very busy schedule. I'm really, really grateful that we've had this opportunity and that you've shared so much. It's been so informative.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's been amazing. And enjoy the rest of your day. It's early on there for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
You're in the middle of your day.
Here. Gotta love time zones.
You gotta love time zones. And you got a full afternoon of consults, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I hope they all go well. And thank you once again for being so generous with all the information you've given us.
Thank you for letting me spread it.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode on the Paws Effect Podcast. If you found the discussion helpful, please like, share, and follow our podcasts. Don't forget to leave us a comment or review. We love hearing from our listeners. Remember, you can listen to us on your preferred podcast platform. Welcome back to Just for Pets. You're with Dr. Kara.
Hi, Doc. It's Justin the Jack Rossi here, and boy, am I itchy.
Are you on a hypoallergenic diet?
Hyper what now?
Changing to a special diet will really help. And Just for Pets have a massive range. And flea and tick medication, special shampoo.
Ooh, how quick can I get some?
Order today and we'll deliver pronto.
I feel better already.
Justforpets.co.za. Vet approved, pet adored. Get it all to your door.